China is building huge artificial islands in the South China Sea. There will be airfields, missile defences and surveillance systems to claim control over important shipping routes. These islands represent China's desire to become a dominant power in the region. However, there are serious problems with this strategy. These islands may not be as secure as they appear. As tensions rise, the United States and other countries are closely watching China's actions, wondering if the islands could face challenges that China hasn't considered. From risks related to their construction to the dangers of natural disasters and potential conflicts, China's plans could be at risk of failing. Instead of helping China rise as a superpower, these islands might become its biggest weakness. But why exactly is that? Let's take a closer look at the risks surrounding China's artificial islands and why its efforts to gain power could be slipping away. Have you heard of Fairy Cross Reef? It's China's biggest land recovery project in the South China Sea. China claims it is part of the Spratly Islands, but Taiwan, the Philippines and Vietnam also claim this area. Before 2014, not much happened at Fiery Cross Reef, but now it is an important spot because of its location and the nearby nations. China claims a lot of the region, including the Paracel Islands and Scarborough Shoal, based on a line known as the 9-dash line. This claim raises questions about how territory is decided in such a crowded area, especially since China is the most powerful nation there. In 1000 AD, India's share of the world's GDP was slightly more than a quarter. India's economy was the largest in the ancient and medieval world, controlling between 1/3 and 1/4 of the world's wealth. A long time ago, in the year 1000, India and China were the wealthiest and really important countries and made up about half of the world's economy. By 1600, they were still important, with China making up 29% and India 22%. From 1700 to the late 1800s, China was the richest country and thought Europe wasn't as advanced. China says it has a right to the South China Sea because old maps show that Chinese dynasties like the Song, Yuan and Ming controlled the area. In 2016, China told the EU that it has been involved in the region since the Han Dynasty. Before 1839, China was super rich, 6 times richer than Britain and 20 times richer than the US. But then things changed. China faced problems like not modernizing its army, being corrupt, and getting defeated in wars. The First Opium War from 1839 to 1842 made China lose Hong Kong. More wars followed, leading to unfair agreements that hurt China. These tough times are remembered in China with the saying, "Never again." After World War II, China got back some lands. In 1949, the nationalists fled to Taiwan and claimed the South China Sea. They drew an 11-dash line around it, which later became 9 dashes because of an agreement with Vietnam. Now, both China and Taiwan, plus some other countries, say they own parts of the South China Sea. In 2009, China said it has indisputable sovereignty over the islands there. But countries like Vietnam and the Philippines don't agree. Vietnam has built 49 bases in the Spratly Islands and the Philippines has built 9, though neither has built as much as China. About $3.37 trillion in global trade passes through the South China Sea every year, making up around 1/3 of all global trade. Nearly 40% of China's trade and about 80% of its energy imports go through this area. If this trade route were blocked, it would cause major problems worldwide. Around 30% of all crude oil and about half of the world's fishing boats travel through the South China Sea. Control over this region is very important, which is why it's crucial to know which side the USA supports in these disputes. Clearly not China. Fiery Cross Reef is a 677-acre area in the South China Sea, where the Philippines, Vietnam and Taiwan argue about ownership, while China is building military facilities. To make new land, China uses heavy machines and spends about $12 billion on important buildings like an airstrip, hangars and ports, all protected by defences. Since 2014, around 200 Chinese soldiers have been stationed there. After finishing a 3,125-metre airstrip in 2016, both civilian and military planes can land there. Reports say there are anti-aircraft weapons and missile defence systems, even though China initially said it wasn't turning the area into a military base. The US government has asked China to stop these military activities. China's artificial islands, called the Great Wall of Sand, are viewed as military bases by many countries. China claims it wants to help improve living conditions and assist with fishing and weather reporting, but many believe military systems aren't needed for that. Other nearby islands like the Gavin Reefs, 210 acres, and Mischief Reef, 1380 acres, are also becoming military sites, which could be dangerous for fishermen. Fiery Cross Reef was first called a fisherman's shelter, but satellite images now show it has military weapons and a 2,644-metre runway, which China says is there to ensure freedom of navigation. The Philippines also sees this situation as a potential conflict. In response, the Philippines is allowing more US military presence by opening access to 4 new bases. An international court decided that the Spratly Islands and nearby reefs are low tide elevations. This means they are only visible at low tide and don't qualify for territorial waters or economic zones around them. As a result, countries cannot claim them as military bases. Therefore, the US does not need an innocent passage through these areas since they are not considered territory under international law. China's changes to certain reefs are clear in satellite images, especially at Subi Reef, which has been turned into a military base with a harbour and a 3,000-metre runway. Some islands have laser and jamming equipment that can support fighter jets. US pilots argue they have the right to operate under international law as they conduct lawful military activities. During these missions, US aircraft observed that the islands are more than just fishing areas. Images reveal harbours for at least 40 military ships, runways for bombers, and weapons that could heighten tensions. The US runs freedom of navigation missions to push back on China's territorial claims, which China sees as a serious violation. Other countries like Japan, the UK, Australia and France also run these missions, which China calls provocative. Some argue that China's island building actually started the tension. Building these islands has harmed local ecosystems. For example, at Mischief Reef, the natural reef was buried under millions of tons of sand and gravel. Some have warned that these artificial islands could wash away, harming marine life and introducing pollutants. Taiwan says that China is taking its sand, which has led to Taiwan increasing its Coast Guard efforts. In 2020, Taiwan took action against 4,000 Chinese sand extractors, a 560% rise from the previous year. These activities harm the local environment and interfere with undersea internet cables. The islands are built on weak ground, making them prone to erosion and possible collapse. Some concrete on the islands is already breaking down, and the foundations are threatened by harsh weather. A typhoon could make things worse, and shifts in the earth could further endanger the islands. Plus, over the last century, sea levels have risen about 0.07 to 0.14 inches each year, and this is expected to speed up. In a few decades, some of China's man-made islands could be fully underwater, unless a war destroys them first, because they are located around 500 miles from mainland China, making them hard to maintain. If a conflict breaks out, the US might target these islands with missiles and electronic warfare to get around their air defenses. A blockade could cut off essential supplies, although China's Navy is now as large as the US Navy. Military experts question their usefulness to China, as the US Navy could potentially take them out with cruise missiles, needing 30 to 50 missiles for the biggest bases. China might struggle with supplies if US submarines are nearby, even though it's improving its defenses. The US could target these islands, but might face big losses if China can protect them well. As China advances, the US is also stepping up its influence, similar to the Cold War era. So, what do you think all these would lead to ultimately? Another world war, or just another spy game we saw in the Cold War? Share your views in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. See you soon in the next video.